Hello and welcome to Insight Live, the IT Experts Take. Today we're going to be diving into the topic of modern infrastructure, overcoming tech debt. And with me today, we've got some IT experts. We have Kent Christensen, who's Practice Director of Cloud and Data Center here with us at Insight. And we have Dean Chila, who's a Principal Architect and Distinguished Technologist with us here at Insight. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Oh yeah, and I'm Jason. I will be your host today. And I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Insight.
You were the CISO here.
I am, usually.
This is your other job.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, when you forget your title right off the bat, it's definitely going to be a good show. So they said break a leg. We're going to do just that. So today, I think we should start off because we've used the term tech debt, but it's funny, every now and then I'll hear people ask, oh, I've never heard that term before, which to me, because we use it so much, I'm surprised when they say that. But who wants to take a shot at kind of talking about what we mean when we say tech debt?
I will. Go ahead. Dean, go ahead.
I was going to say, so the term actually, it's pretty well defined, out in the, if you just Google tech debt out on the internet, it's pretty well defined. It actually comes from the software world. And it basically boils down to if you do something easier today, how that affects you down the road. So we can apply that to the software world. We can apply that to IT infrastructure. But tech debt builds up over time. And then you find, like a lot of our customers find that it can be a lot to overcome.
Anything to add, Kent?
Yeah, I think, I spent a lot of time in front of clients, and we internally have used the term tech debt. The way I define it is what's stopping you from meeting your initiatives. So technical debt is usually something that was a good idea at the time. It's currently running the company, and it's got issues to get to the next step. So that could be aging infrastructure. It could be a cloud mandate gone bad one way or the other. It could be a platform that everybody knows but has issues now. But usually it's critical to have gotten you to this point, and then you say, well, how do I get to a cloud-like experience, or how do I get to AI, and it's holding you back?
Understood. And I want to unpack several of the things that were just said. I think one of the important things that you mentioned, Kent, was I don't think, we have this bad connotation with the word debt. And I don't think that there's any blame that's being passed from a tech debt perspective when we're talking about it, because at the time it was probably a brilliant idea. It's just once you've implemented something, the clock starts ticking for the most part in most organizations. And I think really the focus of our conversation today is to really talk about when we're making those decisions moving forward, maybe to alleviate some of the tech debt that we have, how we need to look even a little more further into the future to make sure that we're not kind of locking ourselves in as we make decisions today. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Right on. So I think, we said we've been using this term a lot. It's well defined. So are we still, you brought up cloud. Is that one of the major things? Because we're talking about modern infrastructure, and obviously the cloud is part of modern infrastructure. Is that the number one kind of tech debt aspect that our clients are asking us about right now? And I think it's worth saying that the reason that we talk to clients about this is because we've got a pretty long history in helping people assimilate and, manage their cloud journey back or forth, or private or public. And so we might have some folks that we've helped that we may need to help again. So I just want to make those statements out there.
There's something that's really, really common. So a cloud-like, or as Dean might get into later, I want to get to AI. But even right now, over the last few years, a lot of organizations from the top down have tried to get up to a cloud-like experience. And that might mean a specific public cloud. Now, in order to do that, there's a lot of things to do it right? But one of where tech debt comes into play is the clock just ticked on all my servers or my storage. And so it applies to software and saying, I don't want to support things 3 versions back. And so Microsoft says, okay, end of support, et cetera, and you need to upgrade. In the infrastructure world, servers get to a certain point where they say, okay, there is no longer support, which is bad. If you have servers, being a CISO, you know that if I'm not getting patches, that's not a good thing. And so, you know, their infrastructure, whether it be mostly servers and storage, goes end of life, end of support, or something like that. And they are struggling with, well, that wasn't good timing. I was trying to do something else. Now, do I buy hundreds of new servers? Do I buy new storage? How does that fit with a cloud strategy, et cetera? So that's where it becomes debt, is that I don't know what to do based on my new strategy, given where I was, i.e. aging infrastructure.
I want to point out too, Jason, I'll have to go back and watch the tape. I'm not 100% sure of this, but I'm not sure. I mean, Kent said a cloud-like experience. And the first time he said cloud operating model. And that's an important distinction, right? Because when we talk about like modern agile infrastructure, it's highly automated, it's agile, it aligns with the business. And you know, it's easy to get stuck in a situation where you're doing things the same way that they've always been done, because that's the way they've always been done. So getting past technical debt is also, like, hardware is an important part of that, software is an important part of that, but the operating model is, you know, kind of the third leg of the stool.
Yeah, if we build on that a little bit, one of the challenges people have, again, we've known for years. Maybe the CEO wrote it, you know, was on an airplane, talked to somebody, your organization needs to be in the cloud. They sign a big enterprise agreement with a cloud provider, or two or three, and they determine that means a public cloud, right? Now, every analyst since the beginning of cloud said, don't just pick up and lift and shift into the cloud. One of the common things that every client we know of is running is basically a VM. Doesn't matter what's in it, it's just a VM. And to push that into the cloud is, at the end of the day, kind of a bad idea, right? Because you're taking a bunch of virtualization infrastructure that isn't native to the cloud, throwing it in the cloud, and it then is even harder to automate and orchestrate and things like that. So they're trying to check the cloud box, throwing stuff into the cloud.
And then, by the way, that's the least efficient way to consume cloud infrastructure.
It is. But that's an example of technical debt, in that they have applications, they're masked under virtualization. The people, like, I got to get to the cloud, just throw it all in there, and they find out it's costing them 4 times as much as if they were to bring cloud consumption to themselves, and or think, you know, purposefully about how to actually put these applications in cloud.
Yeah, I was going to say, Kent, they've then done two things, right? They've not changed their operating model, so they're doing things the same way that they've always done with a different interface, and they've probably doubled their costs because they've pushed inefficient or inefficiently run infrastructure out into the cloud.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Dean, with the operating model aspect, because, I mean, we always think this is a tech discussion, but it's way more than a tech discussion. And that if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. I think that is, you know, tech debt happens the day you put something in, but how much it affects you and how much debt it is definitely is affected by the amount of thoughtful planning that's gone into how you do this. But back to that old operating model that we all kind of are familiar with is, hey, I want to spin something up and see if it works. Oh, it's working pretty good. Oh, everybody, I got to call out at the board of directors meeting. Everybody likes what we're doing. Let's ram this thing into production and try to scale it up till it becomes really critical to the way that we do business. And now all of a sudden we look around and, man, to fix this is going to be a behemoth of effort, and we're stuck.
Yep.
My wife's an accountant, and she said that the IRS is still running COBOL. That is tech debt.
That's mucho debt.
Yeah.
So I think you mentioned AI earlier, Kent, and you know, I think cloud was a big push. Cloud was the thing to your, you know, CEOs on an airplane, and somebody says, "Hey, you got to get to cloud," and that same kind of thing happened, I think, a couple of years ago with AI. The senior leaders on the treadmill or the stairmaster in the morning, they're watching or
Yeah,
reading
what do I have
Forbes,
to
and
do?
they say,
What do I
"Hey,
have to do to get this NVIDIA stuff that everyone's
Gen
talking
AI's
about?
got to get going. We're going to replace 30% of our workforce," kind of stuff. So, do you think? And I think I have an opinion on this. Do you think the same thing happened where we got to get some of that Gen AI, and we maybe made some decisions quickly? But
Well,
maybe
Dean's
not.
more of an expert. Let me step back on what we were talking about and then move it into this. So the challenge they were having is they were trying to get to a new modern infrastructure. They had this debt. Maybe it was how they were operating VMs, et cetera, and they started dragging that off into the cloud. The cloud's operating model has 3 different clouds and 3 different operating models. None of them had to do with their on-premises virtualization model, and they were pushing that up in there. So that was the challenge they were dealt with. Now, that was just to solve, how do I modernize my infrastructure? Now AI isn't yet. And so one of the things that we have done is given them an alternative to public cloud, being hybrid cloud, being you can consume like it's cloud. You don't have to change everything. You can run everything you are, but the infrastructure, you don't have to move it to the public cloud. You can, run infrastructure hosted or on your premises, get it a fraction of the cost and change as you would. That same thing will happen with AI when it's ready, but I actually, Dean, don't think AI is ready to go into production at that level for most organizations.
And you're talking about an as a service model, just to be clear with everybody.
I was talking about an as a service model for infrastructure. At some point, other than the research universities, they'll need AI infrastructure. But first of all, they got to just start figuring out what to do.
Once actually people other than the hyperscalers can buy some of those chips.
Right. And get in line for them, right? Because, they're some of them can still be a bit odd depending on needs. But from a AI perspective, I'd argue that operating model is one thing. Organizational maturity is really most important. And when we're working with customers on-prem AI infrastructure, that's one of the things that we talk about up front. Because you have to have certain things in place to be able to support it, right? Do you run DevOps pipelines today? Is your staff familiar with, even running, Linux or a container infrastructure? How can you support this infrastructure that you want on premises? So there's ways around that, right? We can help support some of that, but that's combination of operational model and organizational maturity that we try really hard to work with customers to assess. Going back to your early point, Jason, just so that you're not putting something in and immediately put it on the tech debt depreciation curve, right? Because if you put something that's just going to sit in your data center consuming a ton of power, it's then a burden on your organization and not a benefit.
Another thing in that space, again, getting into the infrastructure. I think Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, said, by my calculation, only 90% of the CPUs in all data centers are obsolete. Now that's tech debt. And one of the things that happens that we're seeing, even in clients that are just trying to do inferencing or training, they're saying, look, in order to bring in even a few dozen GPUs, let alone a data center full, I need to make some space. And the space they need to make is power. And so they've got X amount of, let's say they have, 500 servers. They need to weed that down. They can do that by consolidating, but they are going to need to, even if they don't know exactly how they're going to do AI, they know they need to have a flexible compute infrastructure. And it's not the stuff they have sitting in the racks today. And so they need to kind of make some space, consolidate, modernize, be probably flexible because AMD and Intel and NVIDIA are coming out with new chips every 6 months, make room for power. And so that's, figuring out your technical debt, where I am today, servers running my organization, where I want to go and how I'm going to get there.
So we've talked about a lot of stuff. How, if we want folks that are watching this, and by the way, thanks everybody out there watching this, what are some of the kind of key takeaways that we should be thinking about, or that they should be thinking about as they're thinking about this? Because I think we talked about like getting ready for things like AI. That all of a sudden could mean, oh, I don't have any tech debt that I'm aware of. Oh, all of a sudden, all of this is tech debt because I need to get to a level where I wanted to do a whole much more processing, consume a lot more power, and those kinds of things locally. There's also lock-in, which I think we briefly kind of talked about, but where I kind of mentioned, oh, you do that proof of concept, and then all of a sudden that becomes the production. Any kind of comments related to that? And I also think it's important to say, one of the things that we do at Insight when we think about all this stuff is across the whole thing, to your earliest point, Dean, is just like that operational model's got to be considered. I mean, we really want to give that advice to our clients of, I think we'll help them engage wherever they are on the journey. So it's not like we want them to go back to the beginning and do it right, in air quotes. But I do think that in kind of this place where maybe there's certainly some disruption happening, we want to help them kind of come out of this thing better prepared. Is that fair to say? So yeah. What are some of those top things from an advice perspective we would give you?
I'd back it up even further than that, Jason, and just say, number one, is IT aligned to the business? Can you support the business needs today? What are the 2-3 year projections of where you want to go, and how can you support that? And then build a strategy based on that. That's, like, I know we've talked about a lot of other stuff, right?
Yeah.
But that's a way to avoid future tech debt. Now, as far as getting rid of existing tech debt, start small, right? One thing you can do, to Ken's point earlier, do an evaluation of your infrastructure, see what's coming up for renewal. Is that something where I can gain some efficiency or lose some of my tech debt? On the operational model side, start small. Is there something you can automate today that are going to make things easier for you tomorrow? It's not something that you can, Kent and I have both been doing this a long time, and I don't think we've ever seen a situation where our customers eliminate their tech debt overnight. It's just something that you have to work on over time.
Absolutely. I wish everybody was doing what you did, Dean, and thinking out front what things are going to come due when, but a lot of times they bring it up when it's a panic. I'll break it into two pieces. One of them, we've kind of danced around the topic of a virtualization platform that a lot of people have leveraged to actually operate a lot of their applications, and therefore their people, et cetera. So if they don't like that platform moving forward, or they want to change, it's burdensome, really burdensome, right? And so many customers are trying to figure it, and we're showing them different ways to do that. And the one thing you don't want to do is get back into the same thing where you were so dependent on one person's control panel that's all you knew, right? And so, be flexible there. And the other thing is on the infrastructure. I think one of the things that does make us unique is, I think everybody on the planet knows I could buy a bunch of new servers because these ones are due and the vendor just told me they're not going to support me, or I could just kick the can down the road by even thinking about third-party support or things like that, or I can go to cloud. And I think what we've done is doing a good job of saying, look, it's a hybrid world, and there's a lot of stuff in between. You can, bring cloud-like consumption to you in a hosted data center. That's a lot easier than picking up your stuff and putting into the public cloud. And so, that's the as a service model. And I think that can be very powerful to think through, because if you spin it out to AI, at the end of the day, they may try AI and cloud, as we know, but 82% of their data is still on-prem in factories and remote sites, and they can't really move that to cloud. So they need to think broader than just the way it is in my data center and public cloud. They need to think about hybrid, and I think we bring a unique perspective there.
Truly. And when you were talking earlier, Dean, I was thinking about the IT transformation that we've had within Insight. I think that it's a really good model. We didn't kind of prep for this conversation, but I just think that once IT became, instead of the keep the lights on side of the business, they were leaning in ahead. And, who's got better understanding of operating models than folks who are skilled in ITSM and other things like that? Hey, we've got to look way past just the implementation. We've got to think about the operationalization and the other aspects of this thing. And we had a really good, transformative way that IT is now engaging the business internally at Insight, which is a really great example. Was it easy? No. We got a new chief digital officer. A lot of things have to happen, but once that commitment's kind of made at senior leadership and kind of goes through, magic can happen. And again, none of that was tech, but it was a commitment. But now the tech is flowing, AI is flowing internally, all of those kinds of things. So, I guess, this is me just saying, hey, a great case study is our own case study related to this. Do we have tech debt? Heck yeah. We're looking at a, ERP system that we're trying to replace and other things like that. But we've, now once you've gotten into that way of thinking, you can make way better choices as you move forward and engage more of the business.
Yeah, and I know we're kind of talking inside baseball here, right? Because we're talking about the stuff that we use, but think of where we were a couple of years ago, and to where we are now, and all of the abilities for Insight that's unlocked. We have, I couldn't put a number on it, but we have far more capabilities today than we did 2 years ago. And by the way, all of our tech debt still isn't eliminated. We still have a ways to go, but we're in a far better position now than we were, 2-3 years ago.
And I think, drinking our own champagne just proves that we kind of believe what we're talking about to clients, which is a good aspect. But I think the things that you guys brought up, really great. So I think, I was also thinking about kind of, what about folks that are kind of trapped in that old operating model? Typically an operating model is going to change top down. It's really hard to kind of initiate that up. Any tips for folks that are kind of?
I think Dean brought something up earlier. Don't try to do it all at once unless you have an end support agreement that says, et cetera. And we were talking about Insight is doing it a piece at a time in clients. When a client says, I'm going all in public cloud, and I'm just working with one this morning that, for 5 years, they've been saying the same thing. And we've been actually helping them by bringing them, alternatives or complements to public cloud, which they are continuing to do. But that is a all at once. When somebody says, I'm going to get everything from here to there in 6 months, 12 months, whatever that number is, it almost never happens. And it creates, a problem. Try it, look at alternatives and things like that. So you don't have to do the big bang if you think about, taking this a chunk at a time. And the other one I think you might have been alluding to is the operating model. Let's say your virtualization operating model. I think what I see is almost every client I'm talking to is trying something else and trying to figure out, because they got a challenge in that they don't know if it'll work as well. Their guys don't know it, et cetera. So they're in some serious pilots. In entire data centers of pilots, but they're in serious pilots, and hopefully, we don't go back into the same, creating the next generation of tech debt.
Understood. Well, gentlemen, probably a good place to close, because I think we want to come back and dig deeper into some of these topics. So you guys that are out there listening and you think you want to hear more about FinOps, a good way to kind of show that you're doing the right thing as you're approaching this model, or you want to learn more about some of the alternatives to that enterprise virtualization platform we were alluding to, or other things related to that, let us know, because we want to talk about the things that you want to hear about. Thanks so much for your help, Dean and Kent, as always. And thank you guys for watching. If you want to know more about what we do here at Insight, please visit us at insight.com. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.